Nord Stream 2 saga continues as the United States is stepping up its efforts to block the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which would provide natural gas from Russia to Germany. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. is creating a coalition of nations to help prevent the pipeline from being completed. The pipeline is supposed to provide a major cost benefit to the German energy market, with natural gas being delivered directly without any intermediaries. The U.S., backed by Poland, Baltic nations, and Ukraine, has long been seeking to disrupt the pipeline that will carry Russian gas to Germany via the Baltic Sea. Joining me now to discuss is Boombus co-host and investigative journalist Ben Swan and former UK Member of Parliament George Galloway. Thank you for being with us today. Ben, already the United States has placed sanctions on this project. In fact, in December of last year, those sanctions forced a Swiss pipeline company to abandon the project. What is the U.S. talking about doing this time?
Yeah, so what the U.S. is really doing, and you know, I'm not a fan of sanctions really on any level, Sarah. I disagree with them pretty much in principle. But this, to me, seems to be maybe the worst example of how sanctions are being used. You have two countries here that have agreed, Germany and Russia, to have a natural gas pipeline that would deliver fuel from Russia directly to Germany without any intermediaries. And the Germans want to do it because it drives down costs for them. The Russians want to do it because it means profits and money for them. Great. So two countries agree on this, and the United States decides, nope, we can't have this because they claim that this would somehow endanger the energy independence of Germany. It would endanger Europe. In fact, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, is using this act essentially called the PISA, the Protecting Europe's Energy Security Act of 2019, to justify why the U.S. is placing sanctions on Germany and Russia in order to try to block this pipeline. As you said, they already stopped a Swiss company from being involved in it, who quit the project with a very small amount left. 93% of this pipeline is now constructed, but the U.S. doesn't want to leave it alone. They want to stay involved, and they want to literally force their will on these two sovereign nations who should have the right and the sovereignty to be able to say, we want to be able to pursue this pipeline. It's in our best interest, and the U.S. won't stay out of it.
It's funny that you mentioned Mike Pompeo, who says that he believes that endangers Europe because it would make it dependent on Russian gas. And then he says would endanger Ukraine. In his opinion, he says, in my opinion. So opinions here matter a lot. George, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is saying that the U.S. should stop speculating on Nord Stream 2 and that it should now be a matter of principle for Germany to actually go through and complete the project.
There are many.
Well, Ben is right. This is a particularly egregious use of the sanctions weapon against, I remind you, a close ally of the United States. Germany is not some banana republic in Central America. Germany is an ancient and big power and a loyal ally of the United States, and of course the biggest economic power in the European Union. By some distance. It just goes to show, I say in parenthesis, how absurd the charge that the Trump administration is somehow a puppet of the Russians. This is, of course, an act just short of war against Russia, seeking to destroy something on which billions have already been expended, and which is the sovereign will of two sovereign European countries, and for the most bogus of pretexts, namely that the United States is concerned about the energy security of Germany. I would have thought the German elected democratic government is the best judge of that, wouldn't you?
You would think, but much like you said, they're basing this off of these sanctions, off of the necessary need to, they say, protect Germany from Europe, right, from Europe dependence on this Russian gas. Does the U.S. now have a right, or are they entitled to do this, George?
No, this extra, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this extraterritoriality is one of the biggest bugbears for many people around the world. It's one of the reasons why the US is so poorly regarded these days. You'd have to see it from our side. Looking and sounding like Fat Mikey off the set of The Sopranos, Pompeo has been literally rumbling around Europe, threatening, bludgeoning, browbeating, bullying the sovereign governments of a European Union that is the United States' most historic ally. Got so bad, you know, the German government offered a straight bribe of $1 billion to the United States to leave them alone, to make their own energy deal. Talk about protection money.
Well, we do know that Germany wanted to continue. Actually, Germany's Prime Minister Angela Merkel has been quite vocal about this and is backed by a lot of the German politicians and political establishment, saying that she wants to continue to build this pipeline. Many think that she'll lose a lot of followers because of this, but she's all for this because this is, like you said, Ben, like we mentioned, is going to be cost efficient. She's been out of the picture for a little bit, for a few weeks. We haven't heard from her since last month. Ben, do you think she's changing course?
I don't think she's changing course. In fact, there was a German official who was quoted just this week saying it's not a matter of if this pipeline gets done, it's a matter of when it gets done. 93% completed, and Germany is absolutely committed to finishing this pipeline. What they recognize is that with that Swiss company, Allseas, being forced out because of the U.S. sanctions, it's going to take more time. The Russians say they'll just finish it on their own. But I want to point out one other thing, that Mike Pompeo is using something called the CATSA, right, which is the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. Essentially, the idea is use sanctions to slow down the movements and the actions of America's adversaries. But George made a great point here. Germany is not one of America's adversaries. And in reality, Russia is also not one of America's adversaries. In fact, even if we set that aside, this action between Germany and Russia is not adversarial to anyone except for oil companies. It's maybe adversarial to OPEC. It's maybe adversarial to Saudi Arabia or Ukraine that instead wants to sell their natural gas to Germany. The only thing it's adversarial to are other corporate interests who say, rather than buying from Russia, buy from us. And this is where it gets so disgusting to me, that U.S. foreign policy is so intertwined with corporate interests rather than the interests of the people in this nation and in the livelihood of the people of other nations. Before
we go, George, I want to get your take on this. Do you think Angela Merkel is going to continue or lose followers because she wants to push for this pipeline to get done, as of what we've heard?
No, there's a national consensus in Germany, left and right and center. It is in Germany's national interest. They have already expended a great deal on it. They are looking forward to cheap and clean gas coming from Russia at a stable price, a stable supply. Russia does not allow politics to get in the way of business. It will deliver on time and at the price agreed. And Pompeo instead wants Germany to buy American gas coming across the seas thousands of miles in a time of heightened environmental concern. That just doesn't make any sense at all. So I believe that Angela Merkel will stick to her guns. If she's been quiet over it this last few weeks, she's probably waiting out the results of the US presidential election. And aren't we all? Aren't we all?
That's right.